Okay, here's a couple of tips for the apple peeler core slicer, or as we say in the Pampered Chef world, the Apcs. But if you aren't into acronyms, it's just the apple peeler thingy-mabop. But a couple of things about that I needed to learn. This used to come in the starter kit, and we didn't have the food chopper back in the day. When I started, the apple peeler core slicer was in there, and people would give me soft, mushy apples. And the apple peeler core slicer will drill a hole directly through a mushy apple. So when I'm coaching my hostesses about buying apples, I ask them to check and make sure that the flour is nice and tight on the end of it. If it's opened up, then it's likely to be mushy and it's rotting from the core inside out. So that's kind of a little tip. Another thing is I like to use what we call cooking apples. And cooking apples are relatively smooth on the bottom, where the eating apples have the lumps. And so there's some hybrids, of course, in between, but a nice firm cooking apple is going to work the best with the apple peeler core slicer. It will do eating apples for your kids as well, but it's kind of important that you know how to pick an apple for the apple peeler core slicer in case you're frustrated. Now, one of the things that I tell people is that you will want to have 1 fingernail's distance in between the little cutting blade right here. Now, this is my original apple peeler core slicer that I got in my starter kit almost 20 years ago. And I have added additional parts like a new prong and a new cutting blade, a new rubber gasket, new feet on my stand. I decoupaged it at one point. Anyhow, but it is 20 years old and it has been a great quality apple peeler core slicer. I found that it always worked best to put stem side to prong side. And then I put those in here and I just kind of slip it back in there. And then I put the cutting mechanism in place. If I want to core the apple and slice it but not peel it, I would leave this down. If I want to peel, core, and slice it, I put both of them engaged. If I want to just peel it but not core it and slice it, I use my little wrench and I move this blade out of the way. But this is the clutch right here. I've got my thumbs right here on the clutch. Push that in and then you can just push the apple up to the blade. I see a lot of people winding it. You can just push that up. I say put your pedal on the metal and put on the clutch and it's right up there. Okay, if you kind of have a wobbly apple, if you kind of help it get started, then that's going to work for you. This is a pretty soft apple too, and it's broken apart. So that's why you want to pick those nice firm apples. So that's a little bit about the apple peeler core slicer. It makes apple slinkies. If you cut those in half, it makes perfect pie-sized pieces for your apple pies. Otherwise, your kids are just going to love to eat those. Now, one of the reasons why we're talking about this is because this is our night that we're doing the potato bar. And so a lot of people don't know that you can actually use the apple peeler core slicer for potatoes. You don't want to have great big huge ones, and ones that are round are a little bit better. And you can just see how smoothly this is working. And we do a recipe in our house that we call ribbons and buttons. And so what we have here is the long ribbon. That's going to cook really quickly, whether I have it on a baking stone, perhaps with some of our barbecue seasoning on it, and cook a nice healthy baked fry. Or I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it into little pieces and that becomes the buttons. So here's our ribbons and our little buttons. And if I was going to make mashed potatoes out of this, it's going to cook so much faster than great big pieces, and it'll cook your mashed potatoes in about 10 minutes instead of 20. That's a little bit about the apple peeler core slicer, or the APCS.